And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Alisa Cohn. And without getting into her long bio, but I'll give you a touch of that. We'll get right into it. But she is one of the number one startup coaches in the world based on the Thinker's 50 Marshall Goldsmith Leading Coaches Award. She's a top 30 global guru. She's based in New York. She is a coach. She's an author. And she does all sorts of other fun things like investing in Broadway as a hobby. So welcome, Melissa. How you been?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks so much, Peter. It's really excited to be here, and I appreciate that kind introduction. And I also have a podcast, which is called From Startup to Grown Up, which is the name of my book. So I just wanted to throw that out there because you're not the only podcaster of this conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with the short version or the shorter version of how did this happen, right? Like my fascination, one of my fascinations with thought leadership is it's usually not logical, rational, or linear.
Yeah.
So how'd you get here?
Yeah, it was not rational, logical, or linear, that's for sure. So listen, I started my career in the nonprofit world, and I was the chief of staff to the provost at Northeastern University. And as part of that, I was super young, but I got exposed to so many things. And one thing I did was I led strategic planning for the university. And at that time, the provost said, "You can't manage faculty because they have tenure." And I
Uh,
thought, it can't be. Like, people only do what you want them to do, otherwise they'll quit, right? Or you'll fire them, right? So I kind of went off to business school with thinking about that, but I got a little waylaid along the way. I went to the Monitor Group, I did strategic management consulting, and then I went to Cornell for business school, and I got all turned around and I focused in finance and accounting and strategy, and I ended up going to PricewaterhouseCoopers in their so-called fast track to partner program, 5 years to partner, and my life was all set. But then I just realized this is not it. No mas. Like, I can't
right.
take this after 2.5 years. And so I thought, what am I going to do now? And I went and seeking. And I just knew that I wanted to make a difference. The music in my head was to make a difference. And
Right.
I met a coach at a conference and I was like, that's what I want to do. And I didn't know what a coach was. So I just kind of followed her around, took coach training. I then, I was pretty young to be a coach. So I was in the startup world. I was the CFO of one startup, the head of strategy of another startup. And that all imploded. I said, okay, I'm trained about to be a coach. I'm going to be a coach now. And that was 25 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, the coaching is sort of vague, right? If you say to somebody, what does an accountant do? They do
Yeah.
accounting. People kind of know that. So in some instances, people think a coach is a therapist, an advisor, or a consultant, this mystery consigliere. How do you define what a good coach is? And you've got an interesting perspective because you're doing it at sort of the top of the house.
Yeah. Broadly speaking, a coach helps you get to where you're going. And so what I think about coaching in my practice, I think about helping you assess where are you, where are you going, and how will you get there. And so that takes a lot of different forms depending on the context I'm in. It's different for startup founders and C-suite executives in large established companies. It's different for I work with some public figures. It's
Right.
different for teams and individuals. So the frame is the same, but that shows up in different ways, even with startups in like terms of what their stage is. So like an
Right.
early stage founder is going to have to really like master the skills of building and inspiring a team and kind of figuring it out. And that's very different from a Series D founder who's going to have to master the skills about what does it take to be, a much more systematized company getting ready to IPO.
Got it. Got it. And what are the best type of clients for you? Because I think the other thing that good coaches know is I'm a really good fit for X, but I'm not a good fit for Y based on either personality or life experience or whatever.
Yeah.
What's your sort of dream list for a client and maybe nightmare profile of
Well, I've kind of come to understand that as my career has gotten longer and I have more experience and worked with more people, then I just really need to work with senior people
Right.
because honestly, like junior people just don't have kind of even like, let's say, the wisdom or expertise to kind of know what they don't know. And so that is one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that what's helpful for me is to work with people who understand that making a change, having a coach, reflecting is not a sign of weakness. It is very
Right.
much a sign of strength and a sign of empowerment. Olympians, as they get
Yep.
better, they get more coaches, not fewer. And so those are the kinds of markers that make a good client for me.
But wouldn't that be self-selection, right? If you really have to sell somebody on the power of coaching, that's probably a good sign that this might not be a great client or they might not be ready at that moment.
Yes. I mean, some people think they want coaching. And then once we talk, I kind of get
Right.
the impression that they're like, they don't know what that really means. And they sort of, someone told them to get coaching. So they're trying to check the box. And so
Yes.
just really diving into when I first meet somebody and we're kind of assessing whether or not there's a fit, I try to do a little piece of coaching with them right there and then.
Sure.
And the reason I do that is because I want them to get an experience of coaching, like what's coaching like, and then I also want I want to myself assess whether or not they're going to be able to, deal with my direct feedback or,
Right. Right.
my perspective, or that they really want to solve a problem and not just talk about a problem, which is a common thing for people.
So I want to pivot to a different thread. You've been in this thought leadership world for a while, right? And you've been in it at the center of it and around it in terms of things like the MG. What is it, tell me what you saw when you first started in this space and what has evolved and what is currently changing that's impacting thought leaders.
I mean, it's such an interesting question. I mean, AI is changing everything,
Yeah.
right? And AI is kind of maybe driving people to hopefully move faster, but hopefully not think more sloppily, right? You sort of think about like thought leadership. You're trying to have a synthesized point of view. You're trying to have conviction on a set of topics that you have deep experience and an expertise in, and so the AI, I think, has made everybody almost like it makes everything faster, and your ability to put stuff out there is in some ways faster, and the question is it better? That's one thing. I also think in terms of thought leadership, there's a lot of sense of people learning from each other, and that's a good thing, right? There's like increasing, I think,
Right.
community around thought leadership and increasing ability to pull practices from each other and work together and be more collaborative, and I think that's a great healthy trend.
Yeah, so stay there for a minute because I think that people don't realize that the practitioners of thought leadership, it's somewhat lonely, right? It's not like, it's
Yes,
the office every day with 1,000 people, whatever. You're doing your thing, you're serving your client, you're spending too much time at airport lounges,
totally.
hotels, that sort of thing, etc. So there's always been this sort of interesting stuff that happens, whether it's, 2 or 3 thought leaders get together for cocktails or 20 or 30 or 100 get together under some umbrella of something, that cool stuff happens. And I think that, you're not gonna be on standing out there talking to a neighbor who happens to be another thought leader, right? You might be that in other professions. So I think some of that is there's a need for that. And then the other piece is, most thought leaders are, I don't want to say narrow, but they're laser focused and they're best in class at what they do. And then you start to see these collisions of ideas where the resilient expert meets the agility expert meets the questioning expert. It's like, wow, they can all actually take a little piece of each other. So tell me about some of your experiences in some of these thought leadership communities.
Well, it's such a great point. I mean, one thing I'm also gonna say, just to amplify your point, like, it's like you're sort of lonely doing your thing, as you said, spending too much time in airports and on airplanes. And also, you talk to people who've got these sort of 9 to 5 jobs, or if they're not 9 to
Right.
5, it's, I'm not saying like they're small jobs, but they're very structured. You go into an
Yeah.
office or workplace, you sort of, are doing the easy, normal, everybody knows the mechanics of climbing the corporate ladder.
Yes.
And so sometimes it can be hard to relate to that job, right? That kind of, sort of
Sure.
experience where everyone is so structured and one day is like another. I think that, like, what's a bit important to me as part of the 100 coaches,
Yeah.
the collection of top coaches in the world, and of course, being friends with Dory and like just being
Right.
as part of like creator masterminds and other thought leadership masterminds, is that you really get a sense of people who know your life a lot better, like they just get it a lot more, and obviously, there's like a lot of great, I don't know, connective tissue that can go together
Yeah.
when you begin to see how they're practicing their craft. And there's a lot of adjacent ideas that come together too. So it's more community, but it's also just more fruitful.
Well, I also think there's a willingness to share because I don't think most, like 99% of thought leaders that I know, and I know lots and lots and lots, they're pretty generous, right? And they're pretty willing to say, "Hey, here's what's working for me." Because it's not like, if you owned a pizza shop and I owned a pizza shop in our local town, I'm going to tell you my secret, like whatever that might be, right? Like we're willing to share with one another and hey, give some feedback and all those sort of things, which I think
Yeah.
is kind of cool.
It is very cool, and I will say, like, just literally today, I got 2 people in my community, thought leaders who are writing books, who were like, "Can you please weigh in on this title or this,
Right.
chapter or whatnot?" And that's just, like, normal, and by the way, and also someone else was like, "Will you please put in your newsletter this thing about my book?" And I do those things, of course, I'm happy to do that, and then, when I need people's help, I can get their help too.
Yeah, it is pretty helpful. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave a 5-star review at ratethis.com/LTL and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcast. The other thing I would say is there aren't a lot of commonalities that you can say across, actuaries tend to be sort of, introverts, whatever. But thought leaders are all over the place, right? You have thought leaders that are, even though they might be making most of their money as a keynoter, they're actually introverts, even though
Totally.
they, might be out there talking about their stuff. They're researchers. I think that one of the common threads though is this lifelong learning. Like I think you and I originally met at Renaissance Weekend years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
like what a nerd fest. Like
I
and
know.
it's the coolest thing ever. It's like living in a TED Talk for 5 days, right?
Totally. Yes.
Um, but there's a hunger that folks have to say, I want to learn about things so outside of my world, like, aeronautics or robot, like whatever. That curiosity piece. Do you see that as well?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that's almost the definition of a thought leader, someone who is curious. Also, I find that people tend to be they don't retire, quote unquote, right? They continue doing what they're doing and they're very vibrant and robust in their thinking for decades. Marshall
Yeah.
Goldsmith is in the 70s. I just saw John Hagel speaking of
Yep.
Renaissance Weekend. John
Yep.
Hagel's, I think, he's in his late 70s or maybe older.
Yeah,
He's like writing his like sixth book or something. Good for him.
which is pretty cool. So you
Yeah.
mentioned the B word, right? So tell me about what your thought process is when you choose to write a book and go for it, right? Because it's something one wants to do. People ask me how many, when should I write my, it's like write the least amount of you need to because
I
it take,
know.
it's the only thing worse is renovating a home in terms of takes more time and more money. But tell
Totally.
me about your thinking.
Well, I mean, I've written only one book. Like all my colleagues have written 4, 5, 6 books, right? So it was very challenging to find the time to put your thoughts together. It's also very rewarding because you're really asked to come up with your framework and your thinking, and it requires you to really refine your thinking. And I think it is a very rewarding journey, but it's frustrating. Also, your first draft is always like terrible, and then you're like, oh, it's so terrible.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to have faith that you're going to go through it and you're going to kind of figure out the breaking the back of it, like kind of really figure out the unlock that's going to help you
Right.
actually write a book that's worth writing.
Exactly. And then as difficult as that is, it's actually getting the book out into the marketplace. That's
Much worse, much harder. Yeah.
right, as hard as that is, and there's, everybody's looking for the, what are the 3 tips to sell more books or whatever, and the
I
reality
know.
is there aren't any. What works for you doesn't work for me, and
Totally.
common threads of wanting a community to support you, but other than that, like, it's and, the other thing I would say, it's a long game, right? A lot of
It's
the
yeah,
industry is focused on short term, you're a fall release, a spring release, whatever. You wrote your book, I don't know how many years ago now?
3 years ago.
3. But that doesn't mean it's dated, right? You
Right.
said to me,
Not at
"Hey,
all. I was just going to say it's like a 5-year march. You have to think about any book that you write as not kind of just launch week. It's a 5-year march to get there. Yes.
Exactly, and I think if you get the right book in the hands of the right people, whether it's today or a week after it launched, it's just as relevant, just as valid, particularly if things are written in an evergreen style."
Yeah.
What are the things that you're seeing? We talk about AI, and I think AI is interesting right now, to say the least, but I think a lot of people are like, we're not sure what to do with it as thought leaders. So on the one hand, I see everybody building their their bot, right? Like, hey, you could, here's the me,
Right.
which assumes that everybody in your client organization wants is to talk to you, which maybe in some cases is true. Is it a research tool? Is it a content creator? Like, we're seeing it's just kind of fun to see everybody experiment, and because nobody has really cracked the code, whatever that means.
Yeah, and it keeps changing. I mean, what I've found remarkable is that I've done now over 100 podcasts
Yeah.
myself, and I've also written numerous Forbes articles,
Yeah.
HBR articles, and I've created a ton of content. So I can take categories of that content. So, for example, all my podcast transcripts, and I can put them into Google Notebook, for
Right.
example, and ask Google Notebook, for example, what are the 10 insights that, these kind of founders say about leadership? And then
Right.
it's remarkable what it gives back to me. Now, it doesn't give me back, ready to write insights. Like the writing comes from me, but it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I forgot about episode 8. Oh, you're right. That was a great topic of episode 8, right? I'm on episode like 100 plus now. So it reminds you and keeps current and fresh for you the what you've already done. And so it
Well, and
helps
I
your
agree with
content, it helps you sort your content.
Yeah, because we're at like 700 episodes now, and I barely remember what I had for breakfast, let alone an episode I did 5 years ago. But what's interesting,
Exactly.
realize themes pop up that
Yeah.
you might not have remembered. This person, this person, this person, 4 years apart, had a similar perspective on
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Like, what if I reached out to them and asked them a couple of different questions? But I think you're right that I think one of the secrets to AI is if it's cut and paste, people know it's cut and paste. Don't have
Of
to
course.
automate people. But if it becomes a sparring partner, someone that could challenge you or someone can maybe play with tone or do that research, like know what it's good for and what it's not. And I think lazy marketers and lazy thought leaders, if you will, are just sort of doing the cut and paste thing because it can't. And that's
I mean, yeah, I don't know who's really doing cut and paste. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that because it's so obvious. Like, you don't do cut and paste. I don't know. Did you read it? If you read it, you might not have cut and pasted it, right? So yeah, but I think it's a very powerful, helpful tool to synthesize things, to research things. Yeah, I find it really, and then I think over time it will become a much better tool and companion for writing as well. I don't think it's there yet, but I think it'll get there.
yeah. And it's interesting. So, your business is a fairly personal, intimate, it's one-on-one services, right? That you're delivering. So all this scale, all this leverage, all that can really do for you is sort of elevate your brand, make more people aware of who you are,
Totally.
probably give you more to select from in terms of the one
Yes.
client and the right piece. How do you think about that?
Well, that is the way I scale. So I mean, I do one-on-one, as you know, and so then I've
Yeah.
experimented with courses. I continue to think about what
Yeah.
can I do. What's a more scaled offering. What I like to do is one-on-one, and what I like to do is offsites. And then
Yeah.
I do some speaking and other
Yeah.
things, and then everything around that is so-called brand building to feed that business that I have. And the brand building is important because it does help me charge premium rates, and it gets
Yep.
me amazing clients who are interested in talking to me. So those are and also thought leadership is satisfying for its own sake.
Yeah. But we'll stay there for a minute, in terms of the rates and such. If you see a coach speak at your local chamber of commerce in Podunk, there's almost a price associated with that. If you read somebody's thought leadership in a place like HBR or Forbes, not
Yes.
necessarily connecting a price to that, but when that client reaches out to you, there's an expectation of, oh, this probably isn't someone that charges by the hour. Like, this is a premium solution.
Yes. It
But
feels
you've
more
already,
premium.
yeah, but you've already sort of flexed your intellectual muscles and said, but you kind of know how I think and what I'm capable of.
Totally. Yeah. Also, people have read my book and listened
Yeah.
to my podcast and they've reached out to me, and so it's like, it's also, they already do have they already know me kind of, and they have
Right. I
respect.
feel like it's interesting. I find that when clients come as a result of having consumed a bunch of thought leadership that we've put out, whether that's video or podcast or audio, they're almost quoting you to you. And it feels
Yeah.
like we're having a conversation with an old friend because they kind of know what to expect from you, you
Definitely.
know, which is
Yeah.
kind of fun, right? Versus having to
Definitely.
create that. Well, this has been great. I appreciate your time and sharing your story with us.
It's always great to talk to you, Peter. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. Good to talk to you. Be good. Thanks.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.